Hello, welcome to week 1 of EDU 360, teaching middle and secondary students. So our learning objective for week 1 is that the learner will demonstrate application of Bloom's taxonomy by developing clearly articulated 4-part learning objectives. And more about developing learning objectives in just a little bit, but a tip when sharing your learning objectives with students, you can make them more student-friendly by substituting the learner will with I can and using student-friendly language. So I would turn this objective into I can develop a clear 4-part learning objective, which is what you guys are going to be doing this week. A little bit of a review of professional dispositions before we get started. So one of the things you'll be assessed over during the course of this class is that you'll be expected to demonstrate professional dispositions. They're listed in the program handbook, and we just want to make sure that you are interacting and communicating with all stakeholders, peers, instructors, students, teachers, in a professional way and maintaining a positive learning community. So you'll be receiving feedback through a rubric that you can use to monitor your growth, indicate concerns, and it'll be worth a total of 12 points each week. And it will only be used when I'm actually observing you with your professional dispositions, so we might not do it every week. And the dispositions are punctuality, preparation, participation, and professionalism. So to be punctual, you're just not late, right? Or if you are going to be late, just communicate because life happens and we get that. Just make sure you're communicating with us. Prepared, you're ready to go for course sessions and field experiences. Your participation is also going to be during class or field experiences. Make sure you're actively involved in what's going on. And professionalism, modeling, meeting deadlines, good communication, self-discipline. Also, last week, we had you guys assess your multiple intelligences. I had to take a survey, and my purpose for that was twofold. One was I wanted you to be aware of your own multiple intelligences. It's helpful to know. It can help you as a learner to know what your strengths are. For example, some of my strengths are that I am a spatial learner and I am a linguistic learner. And I've found that if I can be looking at words and or images or use images in my learning, it really helps me. And you will notice that I'll do a lot of PowerPoints with visuals and things like that. Another reason why I wanted you guys to be aware of multiple intelligences is because as a teacher, you'll want to know that all human beings do have all 8 of the intelligences in varying degrees. And you want to keep that in mind as you're doing your planning because, your strengths might not be your student strengths. For example, I am low in musical talent, and so I have to remind myself that just because I'm not good at music doesn't mean other students aren't. In fact, I found that students love it, and so I have to kind of force myself to incorporate that into my lesson planning. So just be aware of the different intelligences. Here's an example of a vocabulary worksheet when students are learning new words. You can have them define the word with actual words linguistically, but then you can also have them draw a picture, and that can tap into both the visual and the spatial and the language strengths. So just be thinking about that as an instructor. And I've provided you with a handout that goes into greater detail about multiple intelligences. It talks more about what they are and ways that you can provide learning that will tap into each of those strengths, and also gives you a case study so you can see multiple intelligences being incorporated in a classroom setting. So please refer to those for more information. I also would like you to take a week 1 vocabulary pre-test. You might have already taken it. And what this does is it's a great way to have students preview the material that's coming up for the week. It also allows me to assess your knowledge level of the content right now. Hopefully you've heard of all these things. Hopefully you know what most of them are, and if not, you've probably learned a little bit. And this is a pretest, so it is not graded. And then the post-test will be at the end of the week, and that'll be another quiz, and that will be for a 5-point grade. So these are the vocabulary words we'll be looking at this week and using. And you will find the vocabulary in the textbook, and you're going to get started with the textbook this week. Hopefully you all have it, and you will be using the textbook and the note guide together, and I've provided a link for the note guide. It's that Google Doc. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at that and share that with me so that I can have access to that and look at your progress. So the textbook is divided into 3 different sections. It has different elements and strategies for being an effective teacher and creating an effective learning environment. The 3 sections are feedback, content, and context. And the elements that have to do with feedback are just providing students with feedback as to how they're progressing on the learning objectives, and then vice versa, the teachers also finding out that information. Content is designing those lessons so that students are progressing from maybe not having much understanding at the beginning to at the end of the lesson or unit, they've upgraded their knowledge. And context, in this case, in this textbook, it's considering student psychological needs in order to create that positive learning environment. And I really like that this textbook covers this area because I don't know that it's been given a lot of consideration in the past. And my personal experience shows me that this is an extremely important aspect of teaching. And the better you are at this, the more you will enjoy teaching and the more you will optimize your student learning. So you'll be reading the textbook and then you'll be using the note guide to help you connect what you're learning in the textbook to what you're seeing and using in the classroom when you do your pre-clinical field experiences. So this is a Google Doc that you will share with me, and it will be an ongoing progressive assignment that we do throughout the entire course. So it'll be worth a total of 125 points, but it won't be graded until the end. I will be giving you feedback, however, throughout the weeks to make sure that you're completing this. So the way this will work is your assignment due dates will be progressive. So this week, week 1, this is due on Monday, the 28th. And you'll be reading elements 1, 2, 6, 8, 9, and 15 in the text, and those are highlighted green. And you're going to be filling out columns A and B this week. And then you also get to choose 2 elements of your choice, just anything that's not highlighted, and also fill out columns A and B. And this is set up so that you see the chapter, you see the element, you see the page numbers in the text where you can find those elements. What you're going to do is you're going to read the element, describe the element, paraphrasing it, and then you're also going to describe 2 or more strategies and also paraphrase those. And you can do as many as you want. Again, this is your tool. It's going to give you the tools that you want to add to your toolbox that you think will help you be a more effective teacher. And then column C, we'll be getting to that later once you start your preclinical field experiences. So you don't have to worry about that for right now, so more on that later. So our focus this week is on writing 4-part learning objectives. And before we can do that, we have to understand Bloom's taxonomy. You may or may not be familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. What it is it's a multi-tiered model of classifying thinking. And it's divided into 6 levels of thinking or cognitive levels. And taxonomy is just another word for classification. So it's a classification of levels of thinking. And the lower levels of thinking are knowledge, comprehension, and application. The higher levels of thinking are analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. And there is a hierarchy to these levels. And a lot of teachers like to think of these as stairs. You also see this represented as a pyramid shape. where we start at the bottom and you have to acquire the different levels or work your way through the different levels in order to reach the top levels. And whatever level you're at, it's assumed that you have achieved the levels below it. So here's a pyramid shape that you'll see used a lot with this. And there's two versions that you might come across. One is the old version, the original version, where knowledge, comprehension, application are the lower levels, and analysis, synthesis, and evaluation are the higher levels. And then it was revised in the 90s, which I've used both versions. They both work fine, and you can kind of use them however you want. Basically, they took the noun and turned it into a verb. They kept the same levels. They just flip-flopped synthesis and evaluation. So knowledge is remembering, comprehending is understanding, application is applying, analysis is analyzing, synthesis is evaluating, and evaluation is creating. So, because one of the things I found is creation is the highest level, but sometimes you evaluate what you're creating, so you can use them however you want. We'll use the revised version for this assignment though. So action words are the words that describe the processes that the thinkers are using when they're working within the different levels. So when we're remembering, we're recalling facts and basic concepts, and so an action word might be that you're memorizing something. When you're understanding something, you're explaining ideas or concepts, so you might be discussing things. When you're applying, you're using information in new situations that you've learned, right? You're remembering and understanding things. Now you're applying that information, so you might be demonstrating. Then you're ready for analysis, where you're drawing connections among ideas, so you might be comparing or contrasting. Evaluation is being able to justify a stand or a decision, so you might be supporting or defending. And then creation is when you actually produce a new or original work, so you might be developing or assembling or investigating. So we need to move our students. We start them off with our units or lessons, remembering, understanding. We move them all the way up to where they're creating. And information is also provided to you in another handout, so please make sure that you download that and print that out for yourself. And you can also add these things to your teacher toolbox portfolio as well. And here is the term, and so I've got both the old and the new, the old and the revised, and then the definition. And then here's a great example of breaking down or looking at how we progress through the different levels of thinking based upon the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. So a teacher would have students, after reading the story, they would have them remember the story by describing where Goldilocks lived. They would then demonstrate comprehension or understanding of the story by summarizing what the Goldilocks story was about. They would apply what they had learned by constructing a theory as to why Goldilocks went into the house. They would analyze by differentiating between how Goldilocks reacted and how you would react in each story event. They would demonstrate evaluation by assessing whether or not they thought this really happened to Goldilocks. And then they would finally create by composing a song, skit, or poem or rap to convey the Goldilocks story in a new form. And so you can see it'd be really hard to just start off by just diving right in to creation, but if we work our way through the different levels or work our way up the different levels, it then becomes a very doable thing to do. So this is just a little practice here. So you're going to apply what you've learned here, and you're going to analyze this little Calvin and Hobbes. I want you to go ahead and read the cartoon and then answer the questions. What level of thinking is Calvin using in the first two slides? And what level of thinking is Calvin using in the third slide? And you can go ahead and just pause, answer the questions, and then start again when you're ready. So if you answered the level of thinking for the first two panels here is knowledge and comprehension, right? The teachers created this test and a simple question. He's memorized an answer a year, and he's doing that lower level thinking. The third panel, he is giving his opinion here. He's doing a little evaluation of the teacher's assessment, and he doesn't think too highly of it. And so higher level thinking, so evaluating. So even though the teacher might be annoyed with Calvin, he or she should also be pleased that he is showing higher level thinking skills. So we need to take that Bloom's taxonomy, and we're going to apply that when we're writing our 4-part learning objectives. Now, this is just one way that I'm going to demonstrate for learning how to write objectives. There are other ways. There is an A, B, C, D method as well. You're more than welcome to Google different methods. This is just the way that I have used, and I find it to be very easy. And so I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate this way. I'm providing you with a template, and this is your 4-part learning objective template. And you can see it's called that because there are 4 parts. It starts with the learner will demonstrate, and then you provide the Bloom's level of thinking, so one of those 6 levels from the pyramid, and then what skill or concept are they going to be showing or demonstrating, and you'll get this from your state standards, your concept standards, your district standards. And then the action word that will show that demonstrates the output, that demonstrates or validates the learning. So the example I'll use is from a language arts standard. So in this case, students are expected to know about poetic elements. So for this lesson, the learner will demonstrate analysis. So the level of thinking is analysis. The skill or concept is poetic elements. And then they're going to identify figurative language in selected poems. So action word, and then the output that demonstrates that they can analyze poetic elements. You're going to go ahead and do your first assignment, which is to practice writing 4-part learning objectives. And I will tell you the best way to learn how to do this is practice, practice, practice. I do 4-part learning objectives whenever I do lesson planning. I do it for unit lessons, and I also do it for my daily instructional lessons. So I write, anytime I want students to learn something, I write an objective for it. And it really helps me focus in on what I want students to learn. So you've got your template here. The directions are you're going to save a Word document. You're going to find a standard for the grade level that there's a link on the document that I'll provide that comes from the Nebraska Department of Education. So for whatever grade level you'll be working in your field experiences with, or whatever grade level you think you would like to teach in, you get to decide. You're going to copy and paste the standard of your choice into the table, and then use the resources that I provided. It could be this lecture, the template, the handout, anything that you want to practice writing 4-part learning objectives, and you're going to write it for each level of Bloom's taxonomy of thinking. You also are going to identify the 4 parts to make sure that you've got them in there. So color code, underline, and you can see by the example I provide how to do that. Upload your finished assignment that is going to be due on Sunday and is worth a total of 15 points. I've given you some action words to use, and there are lots of different resources for these action words. I've got some Bloom's Wheel for you. I'll be giving those to you. And you can also Google Bloom's taxonomy, and you'll see lots of different action words. And then here is an example. So you've got the standard in the top, and I'd used a math standard for the example. So in this case, students need to be able to create displays that represent data. So we'll start with our lowest level of thinking, or remember, our knowledge. And so this is similar to the Goldilocks example that I showed you earlier. I'm going to write a 4-part learning objective for this standard, and the students will demonstrate knowledge of data representations by identifying different types of representations. Students will understand or comprehend data representations by explaining different types of representations. They will then apply what they have learned by illustrating data in different types of representations. They will analyze data representations by appraising data in different types of representations. They will show evaluation by generating data in different types of representations, and they will demonstrate creation by arranging data and representation that is most appropriate. So you can see, once again, it would be really hard to just expect your students to create something right away without working through these different levels of thinking. So you're effectively scaffolding them to get them from remembering all the way to creation. This will be your assignment for the week. Please let me know if you have any questions or need help with anything. I hope you have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you next week.